Hello viewer, the Nameless Scholar here, and welcome back to more Age of Sigmar lore. Before I begin, I'm just gonna do some self-shilling a bit, so if you want more Age of Sigmar lore, please subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and share the video. And, that's it, so let's get into it. In this video, I will be covering the Flesh Eater Courts. These half-living creatures are a blight upon the mortal realms, and it's the reason why you never go out exploring caves or ghost towns alone. They all share a mass delusion, that they are living a feudal life of being a peasant, knight, or a noble. For all intents and purposes, you can simplify them as they think they are like the Bretonnians from Warhammer Fantasy, but they are actually cannibals. Speaking of, the Flesh Eater Courts aren't just ghouls, they are Wendigos. Because becoming a ghoul doesn't involve being resurrected by Nagash or one of his many subordinates. To become a ghoul, you have to eat another sapient being's flesh, mainly human flesh, while being human yourself. This curse dates back to the Age of Myth, to Ushoran, an ancient vampire and the king of all of the Flesh Eater Courts, and also the Mortarch of Delusion. So what happens when you eat your own dead because you are going through a famine after a war passed through your settlement, and you have to fend for yourself? Well, because the condition of becoming a ghoul is tied to Ushoran, the first signs are what could be called chaotism, as even the rulebook describes their madness as chaotic. You guys know Don Quixote, right? You know, the old man obsessed with the ideals of chivalry, fighting windmills and calling them giants, thinking innkeepers are lords and random peasant girls to be noble ladies, even though they are walking barefoot on dirt. Those who transform into a ghoul share a mass delusion where they think they are living in a feudal kingdom with the ideals of chivalry. However, Don Quixote's delusions were personal and were kept to himself, and by extension to his friend Sancho. The Flesh Eater Courts, however, actually harm others by eating them alive or gorging on fresh corpses and gore. This is called the Boon of Ushoran, where the body is twisted into that of a ghoul and the mind is filled with aforementioned delusions that resembles Ushoran's first court. So the moment you eat human flesh as another human, you start changing in body but not notice it, and you join a grand delusion with others who share the exact same delusion with you, until nothing of you remains but a delusional mind, unaware of the true horrors they inflict. In fact, in the 3rd edition Battle Tome, there is a short story scattered across the pages. The ghouls captured a human artist and demanded him to paint their portraits. He first paints their true forms as ghouls. After the 4th portrait, the Boon of Ushoran starts to settle. Each portrait afterwards starts taking more and more human appearance, until the painter's mind is completely trapped within the delusion, and he himself also becomes a ghoul, unaware of the horrible fate he is in, which is how they survived the Age of Chaos. The Necroquake, however, drove them into a frenzy as their king was still in hiding. They aggressively expanded, seeing their enemies as brutes and monsters threatening their lands, and feasting on their corpses of the remaining as them having a banquet. However, they remained unfazed by Alariel's right of life, while other undead weakened. The reason for this is, the Flesh Eater Courts, even though they are touched heavily by death magic, are not true undead. They are not truly alive either. They remain in this weird purgatory between life and undeath, which is why Nagash trusts them with nothing aside from their ability to cause immense carnage against his enemies. With the Talia Reformation, while more Dawnbringer crusades have been more successful than ever, there have also been moments where they have been jumped by hordes of ravenous ghouls unfazed by the right of life. While the Dawnbringers were expecting to fight greenskins, meanwhile their spies have sent Ichors of Ushoran all across Sigmar's empire, spread their condition as exotic alcohol. Not only that, it is, in fact, possible to resist at least the delusions of Ushoran's Boon, but only those with the strongest willpower can do that, as there is a free short story where a ghoul who knows that they are all living a lie sees reality as it is, where there are noblemen, there are ghouls, Their Pegasi are creatures with bat-like leathery wings, so the horror of the fleshy course is not only being trapped in a delusion, but also, should you be unfortunate enough to resist the delusions, be all alone in a sea of insanity, with nothing but your seemingly endless hunger for raw flesh. Those afflicted by Ushoran's boon see their lives to be an idealized versions of a chivalric feudal kingdom. Many think they are living the lives of peasants who work for their stern, yet benevolent lords, tilling the fields, putting food in the granary, miners mining minerals, foresters gathering pieces of wood, taking care of gardens or machines. They even avoid ominous, dark-looking forests with the suspicion of witches, druids, and vengeful spirits inhabiting them. In reality, the fields they work are just them eating corpses and unfortunate souls alive. The granaries are packed to the brim with corpses left to marinate in filth until the Lord calls for a feast. The miners are actually looking for prey that decided to wander into the dark. The foresters cut down trees with their claws rather than axes. The roads are dilapidated and their homes are dark, damp caves or ghost towns that have corpses strewn around everywhere. Same with their castles and keeps. These totally not delusional peasants and nobles worship Nagash as their deity, as he holds power over them, and I mean that very loosely. Ushoran, their Mortar color, is idealized as a paladin by the name of Summer King. The nobles think they are politicking with one another and having feasts every day at the feast hall filled to the brim with delicious foodstuffs, while in reality they just growl at each other while their still alive food is there frozen in terror. They declare dinner and they start eating the most deliciously cooked foods, unaware of the poor soul that is screaming in agony while being devoured alive by monsters. Those who are lucky are taken to the kitchen and slaughtered, and they even fight with one another over who will have the best cook in the kingdom. Which, that cook just stuffs corpse matter inside other corpses, but details. Another reason Nagash distrusts the ghouls and has vampires in Ushoran to control them is that when they die, they believe they will go to a pastoral afterlife, but their ravenous hunger stops being about flesh and starts being about souls and starts to infect other underworlds. The boon of Ushoran is so powerful, it taints even the soul, meaning that death or undeath is not an escape from it, and the underworlds infested by these geists have proven themselves resistant to the Shyish Nadir, the big gaping hole in the realm of death that pulls all the underworlds to it so Nagash can consolidate himself as the only god of death. Although they can also be found in other mortal realms, the flesh-eater courts are mostly concentrated on the Shyishian continent of Charnelcourt, a feudalist haven for the ghouls, a hopeless hell for any poor saps taken there to be killed, or worse, eaten alive. Given their feudalistic society, the flesh-eater courts are naturally hierarchical, led by abhorrents who are also vampires. Beneath him or her are sycophants mostly loyal to them. Underneath them are courtiers acting as earls and baronesses of a cannibal kingdom. And then there are the bodyguards and the soldiers, then there are everyone else, the peasants. The biggest courts that are on Charnelcourt are Morgaunt, Hollowmorn, Blisterskin, and Gristlegore. The biggest of them all being Morgaunt, which are the remnants of the kingdoms located at the northern prime innerlands of Charnelcourt. As the Age of Chaos raged on, the people had to feast on the dead, and that's how Ushoran's boon took hold. But even in their madness, their spirit for fighting never waned. When they wage war, they don't wage war to expand their territories, but to liberate the poor peasants from oppression. More particularly, their bones need liberating from their flesh. Then there is Hollowmorn, which have the finest, most righteous and competent knights in all of the mortal realms. During the Age of Chaos, they were sent by their master to find artifacts of power to protect their realm. But for reasons now lost to time, they could never find any. With this, a famine started. So they had to eat the flesh of their enemies, then their dead squires. However, as the madness took hold, they then consumed their loved ones and beloved horses in their insatiable hunger for flesh. As the delusion kicked in, they continued on their merry way of finding those artifacts, as if nothing ever really happened. Then there is Blister Skin, who are locals of Akshi, and they revere light as divine, especially the light of Hyesh, the realm of light. While the Blades of Corn were wreaking havoc upon Akshi, they grew desperate and burnt the weak and the old to the pyres in order to appease their holy light and eat their charred flesh in holy sacrament. However, this did not bring succor, only damnation as they turned into abhorrence. However, because they ate charred flesh, their hides became extremely resistant to fire and extreme heat. Ever since they have revered the Summer Children, their vampiric rulers, as divine beings, when they go to war, the sky is darkened by innumerable winged warriors. They are led by their twisted sovereigns and essentially declare crusades in their delusions. Finally, there is Gristlegore, which are local to Thondia, so they are from Gur. They are the scions of the long-lost tranquil kingdoms who were religious in their fasting and meditation, and even saw hunting as a necessary evil. When the legions of chaos wreaked havoc, they fell into despair, and by the time Ushoran found them, he found broken abhorrence driven to the edge from their spiritual emptiness. But ever since the Mortarch of Delusion returned, they have renewed fervor with their quest to bring balance to the mortal realms. When that balance in reality means the likes of gods and mortals piled up as foodstuffs for them. The combat doctrine of the Flesh-Eater courts can vary, with some similarities. Oftentimes, they are a horde of ravenous fiends that seek to eat their prey alive, while their cavalry also seeks to do the same with their mounts. Essentially just traditional hammer and anvil. However, they tend to lean more on the horde side of combat, even though sometimes they can be elite, because they don't really care how many of them die. Even though they cannot bring them back from the dead, they have regenerative capabilities that would normally kill a man. The nobility seeks constant approval from their equals and their subordinates, and this allows them to put themselves and their followers into a frenzy, as well as calling for reinforcements with a battle cry. At the head of every court is a ghoul king or queen. They are also vampires, which grants them the strength and the magical prowess of one, as well as the thirst for raw flesh that any ghouls have. They are seen as saintly champions by the other ghouls, and should they ride upon a zombie dragon, they are seen riding something like a manticore or griffin, and oftentimes seek to duel with the enemy champion. Not only that, they are so finely attuned to death magic that reality distorts around them, and any human close to them will receive the boon of Ushoran without even eating any sort of human flesh, given enough time. Then there are the Marrow Scroll Heralds, who are the messengers to other courts, allied nations, and the messengers of freedom to the oppressed peasants of enemy nations. They carry bones ripped straight from Ushoran's throne, and when they break these bones in half, the boon of Ushoran bursts out of it, and insanity ensues. However, if anyone is found resistant to the boon, they will be killed for apostasy against Nagash. The Marrow Scroll Heralds, alongside the abhorrent Cardinals, essentially also act as witch hunters for the cannibal kingdoms. Anybody who's found resisting the delusions of the boon are either exiled or they quote-unquote kill themselves, or they are quote-unquote exiled, if you get what I mean. Now, like the Marrow Scroll Heralds, the abhorrent Cardinals also spread the boon of Ushoran, either by hiding under piles of meat in meat wagons or sneaking into their catacombs. They spread the Summer King's ichor and infect mortals that way, and hoping they do not get caught by the Order of Azir. Finally, there are Gore Wardens, who are the guardians of a cannibal kingdom's borders, Upon seeing intruders, they descend upon them with leathery wings and inflict unmatched carnage. Then the survivors are dragged to its cave to be eaten alive, or be granted the boon of Ushoran. These abhorrents, of course, surround themselves with sycophants, courtiers who are the aristocracy of the cannibal kingdoms, one of them being crypt ghost courtiers, who are the lowest level of aristocracy, but above them are the crypt hunter courtiers, who are the marshals of a kingdom's army, respected as well as feared by the lower ranks. These ghouls have bulging muscles and protruded bones and possess a bloodlust on par with, well, wargeists. Then there are Varghulf courtiers who prowl on the ground on all fours like a troll or a bog haunter, while the other ghouls see them as most holy Templars of the king. They are actually monsters that can easily chew plate armor, and they are more akin to a Vargeist in appearance, as Varghouls are also vampires. They are reclusive, and only a few are allowed to enter the caves they see as cloisters where they eat flesh. They are essentially sort of like Blood Knights, but, well, individual. Then there are the loyal Decapitators, whom are shunned by most of the cannibal kingdoms, as they are seen as cruel executioners who are obsessed with killing. This is ironic considering that most ghouls think most creatures deserve an honorable death, even though that death is them eating their enemies alive in the middle of the battlefield, while the royal decapitators obsessively focus on one enemy, ignoring the whizzing arrows shot at them until they cleave their target in two with their rusty axe, or they die. These were the aristocrats. Now it is time to move on to the elite soldiery. The Crypt Guard are in the deluded minds of the ghouls, the guardians of key places such as castles and places of the aristocracy. They get the privilege of living in barracks, translation, slightly more comfortable caves or ruins, and they oftentimes search the remains of battlefields to offer tribute to their lords, to be gifted a weapon by them, which are infused with the madness of their abhorrent lord, that will grant any who is struck by it the boon of Ushoran. Then there are the Morbheg Knights, which ride upon creatures called Night Shriekers onto battle, which they perceive as Pegasi. They are of the line of Morbheg, the nemesis of the Carrion King. However, he is sometimes depicted as Nagash's companion, whom upheld his laws. It is implied that Morbheg is actually Sigmar and the Dracothian. However, this implication is ignored by all ghouls. Regardless, these creatures once possessed a Stygian nobility, but when the megafauna they parasitically fed upon went extinct, they started withering. The largest perished, while those that remained became scavengers who fed on things that were living inside dark caves. When the cannibal kingdoms encountered them, they force-fed them abhorrent blood to put them between a state of life and death. The most intimidating factor of a Night Shrieker is its voice. Whereas a Terrorgeist kills outright, the voice of a Night Shrieker is an incomprehensible eldritch sound that resembles laughter mixed with the coughing of blood that disorients enemies and drives them into madness. How the ghouls get to tame these things, nobody knows. It just happens. And depending on the realm, the steed they ride changes. Those in Gyron might see them as large arthropods, or some even might see them as drakes. And last but not least, the foot soldiers. The crypt ghouls are essentially the peasants, the militia, and they are oftentimes at the edge of starvation, which makes them ferocious in battle. In their delusions, however, they think they are protecting their realm and fighting for a just cause. Then there are the crypt horrors, whose height and appetite are on par with ogres. They drink deep from a special wine of their abhorrent lord, which is just their blood mixed with dark sorcery, which turns them into these creatures, and they also don't have the ability to feel pain anymore. Then there are the crypt flayers, which are ghouls that have cannibalized on something of the Morbheg line, entered a metamorphosis, and came out of a cocoon as a ghoul with wings. The screeches of a crypt flayer is mind-shattering to those who hear it, But for ghouls, it is a glorious battle hymn, and they are seen as paragons of virtue by the others, where they have songs written about them by other ghouls as to how awesome they are. Finally, there are the royal beast flayers. They are huntsmen that wear their trophies. They have with them awful hounds, which are essentially a hybrid of a hunting dog, ghoul, cave bat, and a monstrous simian. Their origin dates back to Ushoran's first cohort. His chief ranger's name has been perverted to Baron Gizzard, and these huntsmen follow in his footsteps. No matter what their enemy is, or what they perceive to be as, once they kill it, they will skin it alive and eat its flesh. Anyways, guys, this is going to be it for this video. I am the Nameless Scholar. And fear not the dark, my friends, and let the feast begin.